And now, stand-up community subscribers and listeners from around the globe, it's time to Stand Up with Pete Dominic, where we ask the important questions that impact you, your family, and your community. Such as, will my Tinder account accept my new profile photo for who I am on the inside? And could the new Freedom Phone help everyone better connect with their loved ones and also start another one of those sweet hot insurrections? And now, the podcast host who mixes up TV Marthas like Tom Cruise in the movie Cocktail, Pete Dominic.
Oh, thank you very much. Yes, sir. Man, do I love doing this podcast because, well, starting with those introductions from Pico, always a pleasure and a lot of fun. And let me, issue a correction on today's show from a mistake I made yesterday when referring to Fox News' Martha McCallum. I accidentally said Martha Raddatz, who, of course, is a journalist over at ABC News. And so much apologies, many apologies. I've got plenty of criticisms of Martha Raddatz over the years in terms of her coverage of foreign policy issues, but I do not think that Martha Raddatz would ever allow a guest to come on her show and say that the Civil War had nothing to do with, specifically, the slavery is what Martha Raddatz's guest said on Fox News. Slavery had nothing to do with racism. That's Candace Owens' brother, Ty Smith. Fox News looking long and hard for a black person to say slavery and racism had no connection. So there you go. Yes, apologize to Martha Raddatz. Thank you, Pete Co. Thank you for listening. This is Stand Up, Pete Dominic Daily, here each and every day. Did the subscriber hangout last night. The Stand Up community hung out, about 35, 40 of us hanging out. Had a lot of fun. One of my favorite writers, Rich Louv, who is a subscriber, author of Last Child in the Woods and so many other great books, including Vitamin N, which is where I get that phrase from. He coined the term nature deficit disorder. Rich stopped by. Always great to hear from him. So many amazing people that are part of this community that joined me, many of which in the hangout last night. Welcome to new subscribers as well. So happy to have all of you. Normally, in the first segment of the show, I do a big, robust news segment. Today and tomorrow, I got to skip it because I am on the road and don't have the ability to do it. Long story, but it was great to do the hangout Wednesday instead of Thursday night. Going up to get the girls, or at least get Julia at camp. It's been 2 weeks for her. Ava's had 3 weeks, and she's a counselor in training. She's doing the full 5 weeks, but we bring Julia home. But not before we spend a few weeks or few days, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, in Lake George. But don't rob me, because somebody is actually house sitting to watch the dog. So I remember one time when I was at SIRIUS, my wife told me, don't tell everybody we're going on vacation. I was like, yeah, that's a pretty good point. But in fact, someone you know is actually going to be house sitting. I'm just not going to say who it is, but they have been a guest on this show several times before. You'll have to guess. Okay. Joining me on the show today from the National Women's Law Center, it's Melissa Boteach, who is so smart, so great. I think this week I've just had 3 really smart women who are all policy analysts on economic issues and fight poverty. Bryce Covert on Monday, Rebecca Vallis yesterday, and Melissa Boteach today. All amazing, really smart women who are great policy analysts on these issues. So I highly recommend that you follow them, all of them, and listen to all of them. So that's coming up. But first, my conversation with Dr. Jason Johnson back on the show. Love this guy. Of course, he is a professor. He's an academic at Morgan State University. He is a contributor to at MSNBC, where he's become more than just a guest. He's now anchoring all the time over there. And what else can I tell you about Jason? He is a contributor to the Grio. He hosts a podcast on Slate. It's called A Word. It's really good. And you should follow him on Twitter at Dr. Jason Johnson, drjasonjohnson.com. Jason and I talked about men's health. We talked about the voting rights issue and Joe Biden's speech and much, much more. Also got the audio of his rant about Captain America. He's a big comic book nerd, and a whole bunch of right-wingers have been attacking Captain America. I've got that for you coming up because he told me about it during this conversation. I love talking to him. He's really one of my closest friends. I trust him in every possible way. I think he's one of the smartest guys I know. He's hilarious. and he's really thoughtful and kind, and I'm so happy that he was able to join me today. Here now, my latest conversation with Dr. Jason Johnson.
Most definitely.
Yeah, let me just start, Dr. Jason Johnson, by saying I'm so excited that you could join me for a short period of time today to have you to talk to. Very excited that you're on the podcast. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have fit you in. I've had 2 meetings already this morning, and later on today, I'm going to, a gauche? I don't know if you've seen this. It's like some variation of acupuncture. These people do this like body scraping thing or whatever. I'm going for an appointment for that later on to help with some neck and back pain. So I don't know what condition I would be in later. So I'm glad we're talking now.
Well, the way that you described that physically for listeners, you just had 2 hands going side, like you were had 2 ski poles.
Well, it's like they push into your muscles and like scrape into your muscles, and it's this very sort of intense kind of thing. And it's been recommended to me for neck pain and shoulder pain and stuff. And Pete, I fear very few things. I don't fear the DCPD. I don't fear the LAPD. I don't fear hunger. I don't fear lack of love, but I do fear the idea of chronic pain.
Yeah.
I've never had chronic pain. So I'm like, if something starts to hurt me, I am in every hospital. I will talk to Dr. Feelgood, Dr. Strange, Dr. Pimple Popper, whoever I got to talk to.
What is your relationship with chronic pain? Why does it seem so traumatizing? Are there people in your life who have experienced it and you know what that's like, kind of thing?
No, I'm just a grumpy, moody human being. Being in pain does not help.
It's not come on, dude. It's not irrational to be afraid of that thing. What's irrational, I think, and a lot of men do this, is that when they do feel an ache or a pain, they don't actually do what you say you do and see every doctor and check everything. A lot of guys are just in denial or afraid. I'm that way sometimes.
Nah, not even close. Like, for real. And again, I haven't had anybody in my family who's, had any sort of chronic pain, whatever. But I have friends who are. One of my best friends has sickle cell. It attacks people, especially in the African-American community. And the guy has been in chronic pain for the vast majority of his life, with occasional spots of relief because he has surgery or he's a certain kind of medication. He's a brilliant biomedical ethicist, but like that terrifies me. Just the idea of not being able to just get up and go and do what you want to do. So anything that hurts, I strongly encourage people to do this. Anything that hurts or aches you, if you are financially stable enough and have the kind of health care, because I realize that I'm also privileged to be able to do that kind of thing, go do it.
Well, one thing I realized, I just told my wife, was that I, didn't want to spend the next 4 years of my life, or even like my 50s, I'm 45 now, depressed for any number of reasons, because I'm going to get older and things are going to start to hurt and make, I've, seen, obviously. And so I try to keep that in perspective and take advantage of my health as much as I can now, and not mentally be, as much as anguished and as anxious about everything. Because right now, at least I have, everything works. I'm still running, still exercising in the garden.
Yeah, that's no small thing. Like, you have any conversation with people in their 60s, and, and it's interesting because for me, it's one of those things where, like, it's only once you have something that's sort of aching that you realize that your other friends in their 30s and 40s, it's like, oh yeah, I've had like 3 surgeries. Like, dude, really? And, I've never had surgery. I've had 1 surgery when I was like 14 years old, but I've never broken a bone. Wow. None of that stuff has ever happened to me. So like Do you play
sports growing up?
Yeah, I did. I ran track and I played football. Not well. My football team sucked. We lost every single game.
What position did you play?
Let's see. So in 8th grade, we only had 11 people on the team. So we had to play offense and defense. I think on defense, I was a defensive, I think I was a cornerback. And on offense, I think I was an offensive lineman.
So you didn't play high school football?
So I played high school football my freshman year, where I was a second-string cornerback, and I was terrible.
Well, I just say, it's one reason why you probably didn't get injured, because you probably didn't play as much. I think that's certainly true of me. Like, I was, I don't know if I was terrible, but I was so small. I was just, I barely made the team, so I sat the bench. So I didn't get hurt either, except for emotionally. But let me ask you.
You can get hurt running track. I mean, I ran track.
Oh, sure.
But I wasn't doing hurdles or long jump. That's the stuff that tends to tear you up.
Right. Oh, my camera just went off. I'm still here. Don't worry. So let me ask you about the issues that you're talking about on TV. But first, I don't know if this is interesting to people. You've been doing a ton of anchoring at MSNBC.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you just about, how you're liking that. I mean, you and I were on CNN together 100 years ago doing quick segments, and I wonder what you would have said then if someone said someday you're going to be anchoring on MSNBC in primetime slots. Do you like it? Are you happy to be doing it? Is it fun?
I do like it. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot to learn. You know, it's funny. And you know this, you know, doing podcasting, having been a guest, going from being a guest to actually running a show is so different. And then learning how everybody's show works is different. Like, guest hosting for Joy Reid is different than guest hosting for Ari Melber, is different than guest hosting for Nicole Wallace, is different than guest hosting for Tiffany Cross on the weekend. Like, their staffs work differently. The rhythm of the show is different. And so it's fascinating. It's really, really fascinating to see how the different shows operate. And then, you know, finding a way to I am myself, right? I'm Jason Johnson. I'm not doing the Jason Johnson show. I'm Jason Johnson in for Nicole Wallace. But it is really cool that you get to do some things that, as people who may watch the show on a regular basis, there are certain segments that you can tell it's like, oh, that is very much a Jason segment, you know, which would be different than something that Joy would do or Ari would do or Tiffany would do.
You have to. You're when you're filling in, for someone who's the anchor, their name's on the show, perhaps you have to have a certain respect for what they've created and try to bring your style and accommodate and assimilate it to theirs. And that's a respect thing. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And it's hard to do, though. It's code switching.
Well, you know, when I take over the Pete Dominick show, all I do is make racial jokes. And, you know, that is my homage to Pete's podcast, where he says offensive things to me all the time. Mm-hmm. So that's, you know, it's when you step in. You try to accommodate, you try and give the audience what they expect in your own personal flavor.
Speaking of black people.
Speaking to and of black people, yes.
Oh, there's one now.
Right.
Let me change
everywhere.
Let me change how I'm going to say it then.
More of them show up every single spring. But yeah, I'm guest hosting for Joy Reid on Thursday, and then Nicole Wallace on Monday and Tuesday of next week. So it's been really cool. And I will say this because you and I have these conversations. Like, dude, forget 10 years ago. Dude, a year ago. I mean, like, if you sit here and guest hosting, so it is. I'm very appreciative.
Well, you're an academic. You're a scholar. You're, you can do that, and I suppose you could do this as well. But and you and I obviously have these conversations. Let's pull back the curtain off air. But I'm asking you on the record, like, and maybe I don't know, why wouldn't you want to answer this? If a network, MSNBC or any other network, came to you right now and said, "Hey, we want you to host a daily 1-hour television program," would you want to do that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. You never want to turn down any opportunity, right? But you have to make that opportunity work for you. That's the thing, right? So I'll use an example of an actor, right? There are some actors out there who are being told, and think about this, 15 years ago, if you came to a Hollywood actor and say, "Hey, we'd like you to do a television series," a lot of them are like, I don't know if I want to do a television series. You know, right. I got to make 22 episodes a season and this and this and this and this and this. And eventually the industry adjusted and said, okay, you know what? Your season's only going to be 10 episodes. You'll do 10 episodes and then you'll be done, and then you'll have your summer break, and then you can do 10 more episodes. They accommodated what that actor's needs were, right? So I will say yes to anything. And then we find a way to make it work with everybody's life schedule. So that's how I tend to look at these sorts of things. I enjoy the work. I enjoy the opportunities. I'd enjoy doing a season of a show. I would enjoy doing a daily kind of show. I would enjoy doing a show that's, once a week. I love the idea. Honestly, I like I have issues with his racism, but like Politically Incorrect with Bill Maher or Last Week Tonight with John Oliver, I love shows like that. I love shows where you can get together a group of people and cuss and say what you want and sort of condense the week and cut out the fat. So, I'm open to anything.
Well, my dream is to work with you on something where we both get paid. But
telling you, man, we all got to go out to the woods. Me, you, Ellie, and Wajhat. Just go out to the woods and film that shit.
Such a no-brainer. Well, I was just curious to know that. I mean, the thing about hosting an hour, granted, you're working with the producers, it's their show, you're coming in, you're like a sub and you're doing the job, but it's not like you're going to go say something you don't believe or, you put up a fight for something you don't want to do. But I do think I hosted a show at CNN for a minute and I hosted, a show in SiriusXM for 14 years. And so there's a lot of creative differences or ethical even or moral issues. I mean, at CNN, I wasn't allowed to play flag-draped coffins at the 10th anniversary of the Afghan war. And I was like, I disagree with that. My question to you, however, is, if like in the hour, how do you decide? Isn't it editorial? Isn't it opinion or preference about what you actually choose to cover? And we can talk about, yesterday MSNBC and everywhere, I think rightfully was all over the president's speech and voting rights and the Texas Democrats in Washington. But how do you choose? How do you know what you're going to do with the hour and decide what's most important for viewers and listeners and that they'll care and watch and not turn away?
So there's a couple things. This is actually a really good question. So there's a couple things. And this
Thank you.
Peeling back the curtain. It's like, thank you. I do this for a living, Jason. I don't need your.
I'm interested in. I'm super interested in how people make these editorial choices. Go ahead.
So here's the thing, and I told you this off air once, but here's for the audience to understand. So the difference between hosting a daily show, a daily network show, and a weekend show is the difference between like a local, well-respected restaurant in your community versus like PF Chang's. Okay, like the local restaurant in your community, it's like they have the whole week. They come up with their local menus. They get it from like the local farm in Pennsylvania and everything else like that. And people are coming to that restaurant for your particular experience.
And they literally know the customers. The owner comes out and says, "Hey, Jason, how you doing? Did you try that?"
It's like, you want your usual table, blah, blah, blah. That's that weekend restaurant.
Yeah.
The daily show is PF Chang's. We got a set menu. This is what we make every single week. Every once in a while, we might do Spring Shrimp Fest or something, right? But for the most part, you know what you're going to get. So Monday through Friday, 70% of the show is just daily news. There's some stuff you got to cover. You have to cover the president. You got to cover COVID. You've got to cover, whatever kind of election is going on. And you only have 5 segments in a show, right? When you only have like 5. There's A, B, C, D, E block. So usually, depending on how much work you want to put in and how much time you've got, out of those 5, 2 of them are going to be just you. 2 of them are, this is what I want, or this is what I think is interesting. So, for example, last Friday on Ari's show, Fox News have been going crazy about Captain America. They're like, oh, my God, Captain America and a new issue, whatever else it is. And I was like, these MFers don't even know. They don't know anything about comics. Right. I do. Right. I read comics. I know comics. Everybody knows that. So we did a whole segment that I pretty much wrote about Captain America.
I did not know that. I'm going to go watch that. That sounds awesome just on the pitch alone. If I was in that meeting, now you did it. I'm like, oh my God, that's awesome. I want to see that. Cool.
Yeah, I'll text you the clip. And we can post it with the podcast. So that's me. Like, that is a specific thing I want to do. Last night was my last night guest hosting for Ari. The whole end thing, I was talking about South Africa and the fact that South Africa is now putting their former president Zuma, in jail for 15 months for corruption. And I was like, why can't we learn that lesson in America? There are a lot of countries that have sent former presidents to jail and not banana republics. So that was me. So there's certain segments that really are you.
Yeah.
But you can do more of those on a weekend. Like Tiffany puts together her whole 2-hour show. That's like 80% Tiffany. Joy's show, again, she would be more constrained by daily news, but again, That's just part of the job.
Right. Well, the thing, I'm more excited to see you as a guest than an anchor, because when you're anchoring, I don't hear as much of your opinion, your take, especially when you're sitting in that chair, when you're a little bit more careful as to say what you want to say on this show or that show. I just love hearing you answer the question. And even when you ask, great questions, which you always do to your guests, I kind of want to be like, I want to see him answer that question, because you're such an opinionated guy. But you can't go backwards. Like, you can't go backwards in your career and be this more objective person. We know. Well, we want to know what you think, and so that's my view on that. And instead of belaboring, the ins and outs of TV, I'm psyched that you're anchoring. I'm psyched when you're a guest. I'm psyched when you're my guest.
I want to say something.
I love your podcast. Go ahead, say something, but I want to talk about your opinion on this voting rights issue.
Yeah. So here's the thing, and that is a real point about when you said, hey, would you do? I was like, look, I'm open to anything, right? I ain't never going to publicly say no to anything that's going to pay me more money and give me an opportunity to be a part of public discourse. But here's the thing. I do get to express my opinion as a host. It just depends on the show. And I'll give you a perfect example, because this has happened last night. Joe Biden gives this big old speech, right? And about voting rights. I didn't like the speech. It was grotesquely underwhelming. It was disappointing. And I rewrote the entire opening. And I told the staff, I was like, guys, I did not like that speech. It was underwhelming. And I literally said last night, Joe Biden owes America better. He owes America better. He owes people who vote for him better. He owes the black people to put him in office better. That was not an impressive speech. I heard a budget. I didn't hear a plan. I said that. People on Twitter were upset, but I'm like, whatever, that's me. Like, first off, anybody who's ever heard me give an opinion knows that I don't really care. Like, I'm going to say what I think. I come to it honestly. So depending on your show, there are certain shows that people are going to have different reactions, but I'm always going to be me.
Well, listen, I know that. I'm not saying that you didn't. I saw, and as a matter of fact, you actually, I watched that just before you joined me here to get ready, because I prep. And you said something just kind of like pithy, which was so impactful. You basically said in that opening, and so I want you to elaborate on this now. You said in the opening of that hour on MSNBC last night that basically in his speech, you watered it down to, and it was pretty funny too, dude. It was, come on, guys, come on. Is that what you said? It was like Dana Carvey's impression of it. And I really agree. Like, that really distilled it for me. It was like this great speech, but there was no call to action. It wasn't at the right time or place. Maybe it should have been done much earlier. And it was basically, come on. Yeah, come on, you guys, get it together. Come on.
There's a supercut. There's a supercut that I found on YouTube of Joe Biden during the debates with Trump saying, come on, man. Come on. That's his phrase. Come on, guys. Come on, man. Like, he does these entreaties to people who, like, bruh, you already know how people feel. You're extortion. You're not extorting people to do anything different. You're not encouraging people to do anything different.
Yeah, I know. It's like if I was selling you a car and you kept saying, come on, man, but there's no way I was going lower than whatever the $10,000. And you're like, come on, man. I'm like, no.
Right. Right.
Come on. No, that's. I'm not. No, just to be clear, I'm not going any. Like, come on. No, right. Filibuster. Do it.
Right. Say what you need to say. And here's the thing. Here's a big thing about. And again, I get a lot of hell on a lot of.
I'm sure you do.
Yeah. For all sorts of things that I say or believe. Whatever. I'm gonna be me. But there's a lot of people who complain like, oh, you attack Joe Biden. You never like Joe Biden. Blah blah blah. Dude, the guy works for us, right? You're supposed to criticize the people who are in the presidency.
I know, but it hurts people's spirit when you do that. People want to be hopeful and support the guy, and they really just psychologically they want to. And when you're critical of him, I've dealt with this too. That's not a great answer for them. But you're absolutely right.
Somebody's got to do it. When Joe Biden does great things, I give him credit. When Joe Biden is not stepping up to the game, I make it abundantly clear whether that applies to him or Vice President Harris, because it's not just the funny thing is, and this is, again, Pete, because you know me, but other people who listen to me, that's not just my job. That's who I am.
Yeah.
It's a thing, whether it's that or sports or pop culture or movies, whatever it is, I'm going to say how I think these things should work.
Oh, I mean, like the less divisive takes that you have on pop culture, movies, TV, snacks, toys, comics, like some of that shit is reprehensible that you feel that way. But you'll go out and say a thing that you're proud of about something that's generally unpopular, and I'll look at you like, why would you tell people that, dude?
It's a thing. It's a thing.
I love about you. So I love. So of course you're going to do it with politics too. But so let me just. I said on this show yesterday, I did give a little bit of a take on my podcast yesterday, which I haven't been as much. But on this issue, it's like it seems like there's a lot of time spent on TV, radio, and newspapers and magazines talking about the voting rights issue and what needs to get done. What the problems are. It seems like everybody's kind of doing everything they can. Texas Democrats literally leaving the state and trying to cajole these senators and so on. But the bottom line to me is maybe we're just trying to fill space, Jason, because it does seem to me that it's pretty simple. And I really want to be wrong about this maybe, but maybe I don't, that it's 2 senators in the Senate. It's just those 2 Democratic senators that stand in the way of these voting rights bills being passed and upholding the civil rights era fight of the 60s. Like, it's these 2 senators. Is there more that we need to know?
So, yeah, there's a little bit more. So, one, depending on who you ask, it's really one senator. It's really Joe Manchin. And depending on who you ask in D.C., Joe Manchin is actually providing cover for a couple of other people, right? Now, the catch is for Manchin, his motivations, I think, are different than Kyrsten Sinema. Joe Manchin is a former Secretary of State, like he is. So he has ideas about how voting works. He believes in some of these crazy myths, but certain things, for example, I talked to somebody who was in negotiations with him, and he was like, they're like, well, hey, you have all these rules and that are being passed in Georgia and Texas about different kinds of IDs you can use. And Manchin, again, I'm not telling you who this was or what the context, but Manchin was like, yeah, we do the same thing in West Virginia, blah, blah, blah. You got to bring a bill. I don't see why that's such a problem. And the team told him, they're like, yeah, but here's the thing, Senator Manchin, in Georgia, the rule is you can't bring in a utility bill. You can't use your student ID. You can only use these certain IDs that people don't have access to. He didn't even know. And he was like, oh, well, yeah, I don't agree with that. We didn't do that when I was Secretary of State. So some of this is their ignorance, which they're allowed to have.
And you're talking about registering to vote, not going to the poll to vote. You need that stuff to register.
Right. We're talking about going to the poll, because this is why IDs are such trash anyway, but it's kind of a lost battle. You got to have all that ID to register.
Yes.
So the idea that you have to bring it again when you go vote is so insane, because you've already proven that you can register to vote. So for the senatorial issue, right, it's partially him. Here's the thing about the filibuster and voting rights in general for everybody to understand very simply, because I think part of this is going to get passed. I 150% think that some of this is going to get passed. The issue is it's not about getting rid of the filibuster. It's not. You don't have to get rid of the filibuster. And that's why the position that Manchin, and to a lesser extent Sinema, because I think Sinema is just kind of, honestly, I think Kyrsten Sinema doesn't really care about the issues and she likes being contrarian. And that's not gendered. It's just, because Joe Manchin has at least agreed to meet with the Democrats from Texas. Kyrsten Sinema doesn't even meet with people.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I talked to the Secretary of State in Arizona. I think her name is Katie Hopkins. She's running for governor. I interviewed her earlier this week, and I asked her directly. I was like, she's your senator. Have you talked to her? She's like, we've had conversations with her staff. I'm like, the fact that Kyrsten Sinema hasn't even talked to her own Secretary of State in her own state where they're doing these crazy audits. No, she's on some completely different stuff.
That's bizarre, because it's outrageous.
Ridiculous.
If you want to know the answer to a question and you're a smart person, then it's not hard to know who to ask. And then the question would be, well, do I have access to that person? Well, if you're a senator, you have access to anybody in the world, basically. So.
Yeah. This is technically down the hallway. But the thing I wanted to say, so for everybody to understand very simply about the filibuster, is you don't have to get rid of the filibuster. You have a lot of old school, 99% white senators who are like, oh, we don't want to get rid of it in case we're ever out of power, et cetera, et cetera. You don't have to get rid of the filibuster. Literally, all you have to do is reform the filibuster back to where it was in the 1970s. Now, have you heard this thing about reforming it?
I've heard different takes on it for sure. Yeah. Adam Jettleson writes about it, I think.
Yeah, basically all you have to do is reform the filibuster back to where it was 40 something years ago when it was like the Double Dare physical challenge. And it's like, you can still filibuster, but you have to stand there and speak in order to hold the floor. Right now, in order to stop a vote on a bill, all you got to do is say, I'm going to filibuster. And then basically nothing can happen unless you get 60 votes to overthrow that person. The old school way is you have to stand up there and speak and read from a phone book or something else like that to delay. And the moment that you've run out of people willing to do that or you're exhausted, then the vote can be held. That's what we need to return to, because I promise you, as much as Republicans hate this stuff, Mitch McConnell is not going to stand on the podium in the Senate for 23 hours reading from the damn phone book. First off, we don't have phone books anymore, so he can't really do that. Right. Yeah, he might find one. I'm sure he's got one somewhere next to his, black slave tchotchkes and stable boys outside of his house. But all that being said, if you just return it to the old way, the Republicans ain't about that life. You'll have like 4 of them willing to filibuster and everybody else will give up. And I think they can do that. I think you can get Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema to be like, we're not going to get rid of the filibuster. We're just going to return it to the way it used to be.
Do you have 2 more minutes for 2 quick questions?
I can give you 2 quick questions. Yes.
So what should Biden do?
So Joe Biden needs to do something. In political science, we call this directional theory. There's median voter theory and directional theory. Median voter theory is the way you win is by being close to the middle of where everybody is, right? And you slice your way, and that's how you win an election. Directional theory basically says that you win voters by taking a more extreme position than your side and dragging people towards you. Directional theory makes more sense in our current politics. People like candidates to take positions that are more extreme than theirs because then they think you'll actually get things done. Now, why do I say that? Joe Biden needs to say, I want to expand the courts. I want to abolish the filibuster. I want to this. You take the extreme position because then it allows Manchin and Sinema and everybody else to appear to be compromising by saying, well, I'm not going to go as far as you, Joe Biden, but what I will do is this, right? And then everybody wins, but you've dragged people in your direction. So that's what Joe Biden needs to do. He needs to talk about voting rights every day. And I have said this multiple times. I probably said this on your show. If I'm Joe Biden, for the visual, I am going to a municipal election somewhere in this country this fall, and I'm going to stand in line.
Yeah.
Just
that's a great point.
Line.
The last question was, we're arguing about history and what should be taught in schools, and wherever the Overton window is, it's hard to know. But yesterday on Fox News, a black man, Candace Owens' brother named Ty Smith, basically said that slavery, wasn't about racism. And what's worse is the anchor didn't challenge him and thanked him for coming on. And so my question to you is, I know that's like, it's such a reprehensible thing. I just want to get your reaction to that being said by a black guy on Fox News, there being no pushback. Where does that make the window? These types of things, we don't have to discuss them, but it would seem that that's a weird place to be.
If an armadillo came up to me right now and said, you know what, the moon is made of green cheese, which is the part that's more ridiculous? The moon part or the fact that an armadillo is speaking? I would say the armadillo is speaking, right? This is basically some talking armadillo crap. OK, like why would you listen to an armadillo? You'd be amazed it's talking, but you wouldn't listen to it. I don't listen to these people. I don't listen to them because they're full of crap and it's bad faith. So I don't even have to get to the green cheese part. I don't have to get to the part that the moon is made of cheese. You are a talking armadillo. You are a talking muskrat. I don't have to listen to muskrat.
I agree, but they're coming to my school board and telling us not to teach history. Those people.
Now, see, that's a different issue. That's a different issue. Yeah, because what some silly person says on Fox News is different than what you have happening at local school boards. What needs to happen, and this is, again, the whole Republican strategy. I talked to Michael Steele about this. The whole Republican strategy with critical race theory, which has been around for 50,000 years, is to empower the local crank. Right. You know this. Every school board, every city council has some. I mean, I love Parks and Rec. There's always some goofball that comes into the city council meeting every week with a brand new complaint. And I've got 30 names from the local coffee shop and the local DMV and blah, 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 blah. And they want to complain. And then they put it on video and then Tucker amplifies it. So those people coming out and screaming, or what is it? You got this case in Nashville where a teacher got fired for assigning a Ta-Nehisi Coates article. And he was also the baseball coach. Like, This just happened in Tennessee. So at the local level, you have to empower your local elected officials to ignore these people. And I know nobody wants to hear this, but quite frankly, what Democrats and progressive and common sense people are going to have to do, which they've never really thought about in the past, is you got to recognize that you got to start running for local office. And you may not feel like it, but you can't leave these things to other people anymore, because that's how you get the reason Republicans can do what they want to do is because they dominate school boards in Texas, because nobody cares about the school board. And then you find out that your daughter can't learn about any women in history until Geraldine Ferraro, right? So some of this, the solution is getting locally involved or going to your local city council meetings and screaming at that crank, because next week he'll be complaining about Sharia law and the LGBTQ agenda and whatever other crazy thing motivates him.
He lives right next door to me. Thank you.
Yeah. My pleasure, always, Pete. And I'm going to text you. The piece I did about Captain America.
I can't wait to watch it, and I'll share it in the show notes for everybody else. Thank you, sir.
Later, man. Peace.
All right, there you go, Dr. Jason Johnson. Follow him on Twitter and watch him on MSNBC. Listen to his podcast, A Word, on Slate Podcast. So good, always so good. And I pulled the audio for you for that segment that he was referring to, where he did a little video op-ed about the whole Captain America controversy. I think speaks for itself. Just imagine him sitting in a nice suit, wearing a bow tie, and this rant. It gives me chills. He's such a comic book nerd, and I was too growing up. I mean, I don't know if I was a comic book nerd. I read comic books like crazy, and nerding out means you can kind of talk about them and analyze them. I couldn't do that nearly as well as he can, but I just love this. I think it's fantastic. And if I'm being honest with you, it gave me chills at the end. It did give me chills a little bit at the end. Here's Dr. Jason Johnson on MSNBC.
First it was Mr. Potato Head, then it was Dr. Seuss. Now the people at Fox News are attacking Captain America for being too woke and too political in a new series Marvel just launched.
Marvel has newly woke Captain America. Can you believe this?
Marvel Comics under fire for Captain America getting political and far from patriotic.
Captain America claims the American dream is a lie. So what does Superman think of the Marvel hero abandoning the truth, justice, and the American way?
Perhaps Captain needs to be demoted to lieutenant.
This is what happens when you allow left-wing activists to write your comic books.
If Captain America can't love America, then who can?
Okay, first off, Dean Cain played Superman, who's from D.C. Why is he attacking Captain America? Anyway, yes, they're devoting entire segments on Fox News to this hard-hitting topic. Now, let me be clear. As an actual comic fan, see the pen? We need to fact-check this. First off, Captain America is political and has always been political. His first issue in 1941 featured him punching Hitler in the face. He's talking about the American dream as something to strive to, because it isn't there for everyone. Steve Rogers, Captain America, has always been fighting against bullies, whether they were foreign or domestic or on Fox. He's pro-immigration, he's pro-aliens, and he's always been pro-labor. And Falcon runs up next to him in Winter Soldier and says, "On your left." He's not just talking about directions. The only people who think comic books aren't political, on the right or the left, are those who've actually never read a comic book in their entire lives. The X-Men are about civil rights. Superman is about an illegal alien finding his way. The Hulk was a commentary on the nuclear arms race. And I promise you, Tony Stark isn't trying to pay capital gains taxes on his armor. If Captain America were a real person, he'd have taken out the insurrectionists and then handed out voter registration cards on January 6th. Captain America faced Ronald Reagan, Richard Nixon, and Thanos. I'm pretty sure he's not worried about being canceled by Tucker Carlson.
Marvel Comics is the embodiment of the American dream, and now they want to convince children it's not real. It's horrible. I'm done with Captain America. He's dead.
A network crying about cancel culture now trying to cancel America's greatest superhero. Stick to defending white nationalists and voter suppression. No Captain America slander is allowed when I'm here. Steve Rogers always says, I can do this all day.
Yeah, and you know he can. It's my guy right there. Love him. Jason Johnson, thank you very much, my friend. All right, now coming up is a first-timer here on the podcast. I'd had her on the old show. I've had cocktails with her in D.C. when I was talking to and getting to know some of these folks I call the anti-poverty heroes. She is now at the National Women's Law Center, where she's the vice president of income security, childcare, and early learning. And she writes great blogs over there. I highly recommend them, and anything else that Melissa Boteach is doing and saying. Follow her on Twitter as well. We had a great conversation the other day about all of the issues that she cares and advocates so much for. She's on Twitter at MBoteach. Boteach, I believe it's pronounced as her name. And I was really happy to get her here on the program. It's been a great week of super smart women talking about policy issues here on the podcast regarding folks who need more opportunities and need a lot of different policy issues to be changed. Melissa is brilliant on it. It was so great to get her on. And here now, my conversation with Melissa Boteach. All right, there she is. Melissa, thank you so much for joining me. It's so great to hear you. I've just told everybody about that you've basically dedicated your entire career to working with organizations and movements to fight poverty. Is that pretty accurate to understand, and to fight poverty and create opportunity to solve those issues? Yeah?
That's my life's work.
So I met you when you were at Center for American Progress, and you came up with you were behind a great initiative there fighting poverty. You're now at a different organization, which is really interesting, called the National Women's Law Center. Tell me about the work that your organization does.
So the National Women's Law Center, our slogan is justice for her, justice for all. And so what that means is that when we center women, and particularly women who are facing multiple and intersecting forms of discrimination, so women of color, LGBTQ women, women with disabilities, that all of us benefit, because when our society works for those women, it's going to work better for all of us. And so we work to advance that notion in the courts, in legislatures, and in the media, and in the public square.
I was arguing with a 20-year-old man the other day, and he was telling me, I mean, granted, I met him on Twitter, that women have more privilege than men. And I was like, oh, okay, do tell. And he said they always get the benefit of the doubt in child custody. And I was like, okay. So like this idea that we're advocating for women and families and law, you hear that a lot, these family separation. Have you ever done any work on that, or is there anything to say about that kind of notion that women somehow get custody of the children? I've heard that for years from men, the kind of, quote, men right movement. Oh, they always get the kids. I'm like, what is happening? What are you talking about?
Yeah, so I haven't done specific work on custody. I've done work on sort of family stability and family economic security and the ways in which those things are related. I can tell you that, women a lot of times are, single parents for young children, and that is presents a whole range of economic insecurity, because our society is not set up to help those women really parent. We are the only country without paid family and medical leave. We don't have a system of high quality, affordable childcare. We finally just got a child tax credit that's fully available to low income mothers, but that was a long time coming. So to think that being a single mother parenting young children is some kind of paradise that, it's a plot, it's a feminist plot, is, I think, a little off base. You have a piece at your organization website, nwlc.org. It's titled Peak Patriarchy. The federal government plans to give more money to Boeing. This is one company. Than the entire child care industry. That made me throw something here in the shed. It was just think about government investments and how they pay off. I think about that all the time. I don't know anything about that stuff, but where government invests and then what society gets back. And to think, sure, there's plenty of great things about building airplanes, and a lot of people use airplanes, but that's this figure and the statistics that you lay out in this policy. It's the kind of outrageous statistic that makes you wonder how we're going to make progress if people don't understand simple investments in families. What do we need to know here, and why does this happen? Well, there's no shade on airplanes, first of all. But it is emblematic of sort of how we think about social infrastructure, as opposed to just the physical infrastructure and things that you can touch and drive on, and the roads and the bridges. I like roads and bridges. They're great. But in addition to needing a road to get to work, I also need care to get to work. And so do millions of families, not just women, and not just for children, also for people with disabilities, for our parents who are aging, for a lot of folks, especially during the pandemic. It became very clear a truth that had existed long before the pandemic, that childcare is fundamental to our economy. And so when all of a sudden we were without it, centers were closed, parents couldn't send their kids in, you have kids running around in the Zoom background, you have people dropping out of the labor force. All of a sudden we had this collective wake up that, whoa, wait a minute, maybe childcare is not just some luxury that's nice to have. Maybe this is actually a public good akin to K through 12 education, because children's brains don't turn on at age 5. And that's when we start saying, oh, we will have public education for you. The fastest rate of growth for children's brains is actually birth to 5. And the work of early educators is highly skilled work in terms of providing nurturing and caring and high quality environments. And yet these women, disproportionately Black and brown women and immigrant women, are paid poverty wages for doing that essential work. And at the same time, parents can't afford it. What that tells me, when you have parents and families that can't afford it and providers who are making poverty wages, is that you need a third-party investor. You need the federal government to fill that hole, and to be able to treat 0 to 5 in the same way that you treat K through 12.
My understanding from a lot of early childhood experts that there's a lot of consensus on what you just said. 0 to 5, investing at that point in universal pre-K or different kinds of child care and education. The statistics are that when they get to be 18, if they had that, they have much better outcomes, and by almost every measure. And you can see that. You can also, unfortunately, break it down by zip code. If you had pre-K education when you are 18, you're much more likely to go on to college or have better outcomes. I forget those studies, but I felt like there was a lot of consensus among early childhood experts and others who understand child development that investment pays off every time.
Every time, and not just for the kids, for the parents too. Because we just did a study with Columbia University School of our Center for the Study of Social Policy and Poverty. And one of the things we found was that when you invest in high quality, affordable childcare, women on average make $100,000 more over their lifetime, and they are more secure in retirement. And so if you think about it, when you drop out or you reduce your hours in the labor force because you don't have care options, you're not only losing those wages in real time, those wage losses compound over the course of your lifetime. There's lost Social Security quarters that you're paying in. There's lost retirement savings. And all of that, by the time you reach retirement, there's 2 times when women's poverty is diverges dramatically from men's poverty. It's always higher, but there are 2 points if you look at the life cycle where it's the biggest divergence. 1, it's in childbearing age, and 2 is in retirement. And they're related.
Great points. I am so reminded about how much I love talking to you and reading you in preparation for this, Melissa. So let me make the argument that somebody, I don't know, I guess on the right would make that it's not government's role or responsibility to invest in these childhood education programs, pre-K, et cetera. That's not government's role. And I'm not, let's not about the Constitution, not a constitutional argument, just the idea. I mean, people have these ideas even in Europe and other countries where they actually do have these services. What would you say to that argument that government shouldn't be involved with this?
I mean, I would say that care, just like we need roads and bridges and sewage systems, sometimes childcare feels like a sewage system. I'm just thinking of roads and bridges.
Yeah, I know.
And sewage systems, and that we all collectively pay taxes to use those things. Even if you don't have kids right now, or even if you never plan to have kids, the economy functions when you have a core care infrastructure, not just for childcare, although that's what my focus is, but for paid family and medical leave, for home and community-based supports for aging adults and people with disabilities. If you think about it, both as education, because I don't think there's really an argument that the government has no role to play in children's education. for K through 12. I mean, there's an argument, but it's
you're not listening to some of the same people on the right I am. But go ahead. Yes, I agree with you. But
I don't think that there is a plan on the table or a pushback on the table to say that we should just dismantle all K through 12 public education. And so the idea that, again, children's brains are developing during that time, the idea that for our economy to function, businesses benefit, families benefit when we are able to secure high quality care options and go to work, that turns it into a public good. And I think that that is something where, again, even if you don't have kids, people see the benefit of it.
Actually, my fake producer is telling me in my ear that Rand Paul has just submitted abolishing K through 12 schools on the Senate floor right now. So it's happening as we speak. I mean, it's we can make these jokes, but it's like, wait, what did you say? What do you want to do? What happened? So you have this. You have a great piece titled "What the American Family's Plan Means for Women." It's really interesting, but the opening of it is very dramatic. You write, every working caregiver I know has at one point thought to themselves, how can it be this hard? I thought it was a great way to open this. And you talk all about what the American Family's Plan would be. We can talk about the potential of it passing politically or where we're at and what has passed. But talk to me a little bit about what's being proposed. And from my point of view, folks like you, and I include you and many others I've always referred to as the anti-poverty heroes. I'm hearing a kind of rhetoric and a kind of tone out of you I've never heard, meaning positive, meaning, oh my gosh, it's possible that we might actually make a difference in passing the policies we know work. This might happen. We know they work and we might actually pass them. What are we talking about that is realistically possibly going to pass?
So, glad you asked, Pete. The American Families Plan and the American Jobs Plan are sort of the two big initiatives of the administration, but they're falling under this bucket of Build Back Better. So I'm going to call it Build Back Better, which is largely a recognition of the fact that things weren't so hunky-dory before the pandemic. We are not trying to get back to a place where parents couldn't afford childcare and providers were making poverty wages and nobody had paid leave. That was not that great.
Right.
And so if we have a chance to actually learn the lessons of what was exposed and exacerbated during this pandemic and make different choices, that this Build Back Better plan is a really important set of policies to get us there. So let me explain some of the things that are in there.
Yeah.
One is it extends the changes that were made in the American Rescue Plan to the child tax credit. If you have not yet filed for your child tax credit, go do it. It's, you can get $3,000 or even more if you have young children. This is the first time it's been available to all low and moderate income families and had a plus up for young children, something I've been working on for a long time. And so this is going to cut child poverty in half. Let's just pause for a minute and sit there. It's going to cut child poverty in half. And so that's huge. And even if you are not living in poverty, again, chances are if you're struggling paycheck to paycheck, or even just that quote we started with about being a working caregiver and wondering what the hell is wrong with us that it's so hard, the child tax credit is going to be a huge support for your family and make things a lot easier. Everything from paying for diapers to paying for after school activities. So that is a big part of the American Families Plan and I guess Build Back Better that we're hoping to make permanent. More broadly, it also has a plan for paid family and medical leave, again, so you can take 12 weeks if you have a caregiving responsibility, including for yourself. No more saying, well, I had a new baby and now I have to go back to school, go back to work 2 weeks later when I'm still recovering, or, oh, my mother is dying and I can't go to help take care of her or be with her. Or I have cancer and I guess I'm going to have to lose my job. The ridiculous statements that the ridiculous things that have to happen in this country because people don't have paid family and medical leave is just heartbreaking. And so this would be a change on that front. And then on childcare, it would be investing in making sure that for the families who are struggling the most, there's no copays, up to families paying up to 10% of their income for childcare, whereas that's what the HHS recommends.
How much did you say? I'm sorry, you cut out for 1 second when you said the number. How much per month?
7% of their family income for childcare.
Okay.
And so, you think about housing, everyone says, well, you shouldn't be paying more than a third of your income towards housing. And then you live in an urban area and you start laughing.
Yeah.
That's kind of how childcare is. They recommend 7% of your income for childcare. I don't know a single person who pays 7% of their income for childcare. It's crushing. It's more than in-state college tuition in most states. The costs are crushing. And so this would be a huge help to families, lower income all the way up to middle income families. And then it would also pay the providers, the women, and that's almost entirely women, really. It's 94% women, and disproportionately Black, brown, and immigrant women. The people who have been caring for our kids, educating them, making sure they are safe and nurtured while we go to work. They're twice as likely to live in poverty as other full-time workers. And so this would actually right that wrong and make sure that we are investing in the workforce as well.
So the whole time you're talking about this, you're talking about a hypothetical potential if it were to pass. And also the child tax credit that did pass, it would have to be renewed. And also it seems like I feel like that was in the past, it was one of the one kind of Republican economic policies, at least that I personally thought was beneficial. I almost never thought of any other. And so I wonder if that's something that becomes more divisive or if it can be renewed, the child tax credit idea. So the question is, what is the likelihood that we're able to actually make this the law and pass these policies, do you think, the politics of it?
Well, the next few months are going to be really critical. Right now they're preparing to pass a budget resolution, which will set the parameters of the ultimate bill that gets debated and hopefully passed. And the amount of money that is available in that budget resolution represents the pie, and then the pie gets sliced up. And so I think that stage one is really making sure there's a robust pie, because if you have a pie that's too small, your slice is going to be tiny. And so right now we are working really hard to make sure that members of Congress, lawmakers understand that the public, including across parties, supports taxing corporations and the wealthy in order to pay for childcare, paid leave, other things that are just widely popular, and that you don't have to be a Democrat or a Republican to understand that when you have a new baby, you should not have to go back to work 2 weeks later.
It's crazy. Pretty much only in America in terms of developed countries, it would seem. And they look at us and they're like, "What? You do what? You have to go back to work after 2 weeks? It's nuts." So
Papua New Guinea's with us, so there's that.
All right. Well, that's good to have. So, I mean, the idea that this could, really be a game changer is something that, you can make the argument. You understand these policies. It must be so frustrating for the policy experts and legal experts who know these things work to not see them be implemented and be so close to making them implemented. But when, you talk to others, they'll say, listen, most people aren't paying attention to policy. They just want to see shit get done. They just want to actually see things in their lives. And I wonder how the messaging is going and if, you think that needs to be changed in any way to convince people, or if there's a timeline on this that if we can get some of these policies done, that people actually notice them and see the benefit, whether or not they connect it to government, or who they connect it to is another question. But I feel like the messaging issue is always a really big issue and a challenging one for Democrats who have to appeal to maybe a wider swath of ideological Americans than folks on the right.
Well, the good news here is that these policies are really popular. So, I mean, poll after poll after poll is showing that people want the policies that are in the American Families Plan. I think the question, there's very thin margins in order to pass something like this. And a lot of the opposition right now is coming from the idea that, well, we don't want to raise taxes on corporations or the wealthy, et cetera, which is also, by the way, really popular. But I think that it's important that in the next couple of weeks, there's a very important window where you should be weighing in with your member of Congress. You should be sharing that these are priorities for you and your family, that you are supportive of raising the revenues necessary to ensure that we're really giving middle-class families and struggling families a fair shot here. And you said before something, that you consider us like the anti-poverty heroes. The people who I meet who are the anti-poverty heroes are the people who are organizing on the ground every single day, and the families who are most directly affected, who, despite not always getting paid, despite not always having the resources available to advocate are finding ways to make sure that their stories are getting heard, and that they are showing, and there will be real accountability for members of Congress who ignore families' real struggles during this time.
Well, none of the people I call anti-poverty heroes ever allow that to stick, and I appreciate that. But grassroots organizers, community organizers, the community members themselves can't necessarily do things without having good ideas that they think implement, that they think can work. So policy experts like yourselves who get these messages out and work on helping those folks, I think you're all anti-poverty heroes. So it's such important work that you're doing. And I wonder, you wrote about this as well. You've written about this, but I think one of the most interesting things about the pandemic is all of the articles and all of the experiences that we had that laid bare our problems. I'm trying to think of like a metaphor, but like when the tide goes out and you see everything that's on the beach, that's in a way what the pandemic did to expose the problems in the lack of a social safety net, and also to kind of help us and make more transparent who what do we call them? The essential workers are. I mean, it's kind of obvious that the healthcare workers and those working in nursing homes especially, but we started thinking about people who worked in grocery stores, people that worked in, meat factories and picking food and transporting it, like all these people that kind of run the underbelly that you don't see them, and they don't generally have a lobby necessarily advocating for them. What do you think the pandemic exposed when that water went out and the horror began? What did we learn the truth about America, our society, and our economic system was?
I'm trying to think of a good beach metaphor to play into the tide, but really there was a lot of waking up of people looking around and realizing that what they had experienced as their own personal problem was really a systematic failure of our institutions and our society, and that there actually are real solutions to those problems. We don't have to sit there and just go like this and say, I guess it's just going to be this hard. The pandemic revealed childcare workers is essential. The pandemic revealed that the people who are caring for our elders in home and community-based institutions, home and community-based services, like nursing homes were the most dangerous place to be during the pandemic. And yet we have severely underinvested in home and community-based services. I mean, I could go on. We learned that, people were making so little money that getting unemployment benefits was actually helping them to make more, because that's how badly they were paid. Right. We were getting to a place where, workers were talking about safety violations and their employers exposing them to, health hazards and all those sorts of things. And yet they're getting paid poverty wages. So, there's so many things we've been talking about this for years. This is not a pandemic issue. But when you rip off you look behind the Wizard of Oz curtain or the beach or whatever the analogy is, and you see, wow, there's a huge swath of our country, and it's disproportionately women and women of color who are really left to the ravages of an economy that is not working for them. Yeah. And just to give you an example, the 3 places where we've done a lot of work during the pandemic, because women are disproportionately affected, women are the majority of frontline workers, 75% of healthcare workers, 2/3 of grocery workers, 94% of childcare workers. They are disproportionately unemployed and having to cut back on their hours. So they're on the unemployment benefit side of the conversation, and they are disproportionately taking on unpaid caregiving. And when you do add those 3 things up, the lack of safe workplaces, the unemployment and the economic insecurity, and the toll of unpaid caregiving while trying to balance those other things, that's why the New York Times called this the primal scream. Women are screaming. And I think that our question is, will Congress hear us?
One thing that seems to help, in my opinion, is electing more women. It really does seem to make a difference when you have women in leadership roles. I mean, you work at an organization advocating for women, National Women's Law Center, and you've mentioned, gender and ethnicity several times here. And a lot of people, folks on the right will say, why are you playing identity politics, Melissa? And the truth about this is it's policy. You can target policy towards people who are being disproportionately affected negatively because to help them, because that policy was directed at them in the first place to marginalize them. And we're trying to teach people about that history, but it's not history. It's right now. We're seeing it right now. So what do you say to somebody that says, why are you so focused on women or people of color? You've mentioned it so many times. That's not how we should be talking about this, and it's not how we should be designing policy. I mean, I can't even make the devil's advocate argument. I'm sorry, I didn't do a good job for them.
I mean, people's lived experience matters. How you walk through the world, whether because of your gender, your race, your disability, as an immigrant, your lived experience affects how you experience the world. And it's you look at the data, not just the lived experience, and you can see it's not like women just decided to drop out of the labor force for funsies during the pandemic. We're like, you know what? I've been needing a vacation. There's structural reasons why we're taking on more of unpaid caregiving, why our wages are lower. And so if one partner in a heterosexual couple is going to drop out, it's going to be the woman. There's a whole range of structural issues that then you take something and the right ones say, oh, it's personal responsibility or you made that choice. But is there really a choice when there's no one to care for your children? Is that a choice? You could leave your kid in a padded room, like a safe space. You could build a safe space for them physically, and then you could then go to work. Well, there's a pack of wolves down the street who offered to raise mine.
What is that? Where are they now? Are they they're still down the street? Yeah, you could come home and you could water him or her. I mean, it's just such a ridiculous choice because it was so stark. Talk about what the pandemic revealed. One person had to stay home to take care of the child. So couples, if you were a couple, had to come together and be like, which one of us should it be? And it's not just who's making more money. It's a hard decision, but it so often overwhelmingly fell on women, period. I mean, we can talk about it, but that's just the truth. Those are the stats.
Four times as many women as men got pushed out of the labor force in September. What does that coincide with? Oh, wait, school's starting back up again. And so if you look at the numbers, then the jobs data, it tells the story of when and how women got pushed out of the labor force. And, childcare, I've been talking a lot about 0 to 5, but school age care is also really important. Right now we're in summer when a lot of camps have been closed down. A lot of camps or summer programming that helps curb summer learning loss are not operating at full hours. And so, again, you're facing this set of decisions of, my employer is saying I need to work these hours. Oh, wait, they changed my schedule a few hours before I'm supposed to go in. I don't have childcare. The employer's painting this woman as she's irresponsible. She's not showing up for work on time. Whereas, is she really being irresponsible if she's taking care of her kids? Because to me, that's responsible. And so it's like how we sort of frame people's decisions that they have to make in a way that is, we limit we're just like a series of bad choices. And then when someone picks the least bad option, they're somehow irresponsible.
Before I let you go, I just want to ask you've studied and been a part of and tried to, and did give credit to organizers and social movements your whole career. And I wonder what you think of both kind of the women's movement, however you want to call it, 21st century women's movement, the Me Too era, and the Black Lives Matter movement. I feel like we take a lot of steps forward, or we took steps forward, and then take steps quickly backward. Like, the Black Lives Matter movement was very unpopular, and then it became the public approval really changed on it over last summer during the pandemic over George Floyd. And then they muddied the waters with critical race theory, and politicians started calling the Black Lives Matter movement terrorists. Trump certainly led a lot of this. And so now I'm just not quite sure where we're at with both the women's movement and the Black Lives Matter movement. So from your vantage point, what do you think each of these movements did separately, did together? Because certainly there's intersectionality there. Obviously, it was really led by women, both movements, I think, in a huge way.
Yeah, well, I think the job of social movements isn't to play to public opinion. The job of social movements is to move public opinion closer to justice. And so that is a long-term project and a long-term arc. And along the way, there will be pushback because that's the nature of power. It's going to push back to maintain itself. But I think that one of the things about both the Black Lives Matters, Me Too, the gender justice movement more broadly, is that the goal is not to, just win the policy. The goal is to, change the systems. And so that requires that we do the long and hard work where there'll be pushback along the way to make those changes. And I mean, Black Lives Matter, as you said a few years ago, people were like, all lives matter. And now there's signs all over people's neighborhoods. People saying, imagine if they at the beginning had said, oh, well, people didn't like Black Lives Matter, so we're not going to do that. Same with Fight for 15. People were like, $15, that's ridiculous. $15. Now it's in the Democratic platform, and you can't, it's in several states and cities, and it's like the standard that everybody's fighting for. This is what social movements do. Yeah. They don't just sort of say, well, we're going to try and fight for something that's already kind of popular. They imagine what justice looks like with the people who are most directly affected by it, and then they set out to do the work of changing both laws and hearts and minds to get there.
So well said, and so great to talk to you, Melissa. Really, really love this conversation and love reconnecting with you. Continue the great work at the National Women's Law Center, and I'll put all the links to Melissa and her organization and her work in the show notes, of course. Great to see you. Thank you so much for talking to me. I loved it.
Thanks for having me.
There you go. That's Melissa Boteach on Twitter at Boteach, Boteach. Follow her there, and more information at the NWLC. That's the National Women's Law Center, NWLC.org. All of that is in the show notes, which is available for anybody listening to the podcast, and more if you are a subscriber to the podcast. Sorry we didn't get the news today, but I'm taking a little bit lighter here in these last 2 days of the week as I'm off on the road up to with Val and I going up to get the girls. Really excited about this weekend. I missed them so much, but they're having an awesome time, and I'm really happy for them, specifically that they're just not with their phones. So happy about that. Thank you to Dr. Jason Johnson. Thank you to Melissa Boteach. Thank you to you for listening and spreading the word about this podcast, where each and every day it's a classroom where we get to know more about the world and each other and just grow each and every day. That's the whole simple concept of it. We'd love to have you be a member of our community. Sign up now. Go to patreon.com/Pete Dominick or click on the paid subscription in the show notes. And now it's time for singer-songwriter, Grammy Award winner, the great John Carroll, to sing us out with a song he wrote just for us. And now everybody else, go download it. Ladies and gentlemen, it's You Gotta Stand Up. Let's go.
Experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide.